In today's video, we are going to be working with Google Maps and Compose. So I'm going to show you how to add the Google Maps SDK to your Android project, how to use a Google Map with Compose, so bringing up a Google Map and doing some stuff with it. And I guess more specifically what we're going to be doing with Google Maps is I'm going to show you how to use clustering. So these polygons that are outlined on the screen they're called clusters. You can kind of define like an area and shade it in, and you can add a marker to it. So each one of these sort of zones has a marker. If I click the marker, it takes me over to that zone, displays some information. So there's like a title here, a description. There's a marker centered in the middle of it. And we're also going to be showing you how to show your location. So there you can see that blue dot that's defined in that zone. That's my location. That is my house. Go ahead, send me some care packages. Some cash is always welcome. Gift cards. It is Christmas after all, the holiday season. Don't forget to send Coding with Mitch a gift and say thank you for his great videos that he always provides. Additionally, I wrote a little algorithm that will center the camera depending on what is available for the clustering. So you saw there when the app started, it right away brought the only two zones that are in view and kind of centered the camera on them. It's just a little algorithm. I thought it would be super useful because if you define a bunch of things on the map, you probably want the user to see those things as soon as they open the map. So I just wrote a little algorithm that basically takes in all of the points and determines what the center point of the sum of all those points is. So kind of a cool little thing. And what else am I going to do in this video? I guess that's pretty much it. The bulk of the video is going to be, the Google Maps SDK setup. There's quite a bit of things you got to do. You got to, enable billing, create a project in the Google Cloud Console, all that kind of stuff. Get an API key. I'm going to be going over all of this in detail. And in addition to going over this in detail, I created a nice README so that you can follow along if you don't want to watch the video, but you're already watching the video, so you're probably going to see everything you need by watching this. So if you go to the repository, there's a link down below as always. If you go down to the Google Maps SDK for Android setup section, basically I'm going to be going through these steps. So it's like creating a billing account, creating a project, adding the Google Maps SDK for Android, blah, 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 adding the dependencies, the API key, all that stuff. Basically, the bulk of this video is probably going to be that setup because I think that's the most complicated part, is kind of finding the documentation and consolidating it and making it easy to follow. So that'll be the bulk of the video. And then I'm not going to go over the code in detail, but I'm just going to show you kind of the highlighted parts, the new APIs that are available for Compose, because I actually used Google Maps with Compose about a year and a half ago. I have actually an app on the App Store called BC Hydro Outages, where I basically did a lot of the things that I'm going to be showing you in this video. You can take a look at some of the pictures here. So you can see there's like zones. It's a power outages app for the province that I live in. But it was way harder to do about a year ago because there wasn't these new APIs that make it a lot easier to use use Google Maps with Compose. So I'm going to be showing you these new APIs. All right, so let's get started here. Let's go to the README for my repository and click the first link here in step 1 that takes you to the billing section of the Google Cloud Console. Now you need a billing account and you need a credit card on the billing account, but you won't actually be charged. Well, you won't be charged unless you go above the daily request limit. If this is just a practice project for you, you're not going to go over the daily request limit, so you won't be charged. Don't worry. So go to there, and you will need a credit card. I don't know if I mentioned that, but again, it's not going to cost anything. You can see my other demo billing accounts here are all being charged nothing. I use these to make examples and things like that. And if I'm not being charged, probably you're not going to be charged if you are just playing around with this. Okay, so creating a new billing account is pretty obvious. You just go to create account, give it a name, give it a country, click continue. I guess I'll just go through the process here. So creating a billing account, I'm going to blank out my information here because I don't want you to see my address, but basically just fill this out and then scroll down, and there should be a submit and enable billing button. So just click that and you should be ready to go. Once you do that, we're ready to go to the next step. So I'll close this, and you want to create a new project in the Cloud Console. So click this link, and we need to go up here, and you want to create a new project. So click that, just go through it. I guess I could click it and see if there's anything special. So create the project name, click the billing account that you just created, organization. You don't have to have one of those, I don't think. although there is a required, so maybe you have to create an organization, although no organization is an option, so probably just click that. Once that is done, let's go to the next step. Now we need to enable the Google Maps SDK for that project. So clicking the next link, go to the marketplace and type in Android Google Maps. Once you find that, you want the Maps SDK for Android. Click this guy. This manage button is going to say enable. So let me create a project where I don't have it enabled just so you can kind of see. So you want to click this enable button. It's going to do some stuff. And now that it's enabled, the next step, let's see here, is you need to enable billing. So I think you got to click this or something because you need to be able to enable billing on this thing. Okay, let's go over to billing, I guess. I can't remember how to do this. You have multiple billing accounts. Oh, I already have a billing account linked to this. Okay, so I think if you don't have a billing account linked to this project, it would have prompted you at some point to enable billing. So all you want to do there is just click that billing account that we created at the beginning of this whole example and enable it for this project. Anyway, do that, enable billing, and you should be ready to move on to the next step. So next is we need to enable Google Maps in the Cloud Console and specify Android apps and generate a SHA-1. So again, it didn't show up for me because I've already done it, so that's annoying. Maybe if I go to enable APIs and services, nope. Credentials, maybe. I think if you click here and then you can go here. So I'm going to blank out my API key. Obviously, I don't want you using my API key, but click the Android apps over here and restrict usage to Android apps. And what you want to do here is add a SHA-1 certificate. So to generate a SHA-1 certificate, I'm going to open up my Android project here, go over to Gradle and go to tasks, Android, and signing report. If you double click that, it's going to run a task and it's going to generate SHA-1 for you. And then you just want to copy that thing. So as soon as this is done, scroll up, you can see it generated a SHA-1. So I want to copy that SHA and then click add and then add that SHA-1 fingerprint. And you also have to add the package for the Android project. So you'll need to create an Android project ahead of time so you have the package and then you can generate a SHA-1. Once you do that, I think you're pretty much ready to go other than the API key stuff. So if we go to the next part, you want to add the dependencies. Now, it's always a good idea to add the same exact dependencies that I use in my project. That way you're guaranteed that all of the versions aren't going to have any conflicts because it worked for me. So using my versions is always the best idea. Although if you want to update to the newest versions, maybe you're watching this video a year later from when I made it and there's a bunch of new versions. That is a gamble that you are going to take, so I can't guarantee that it's going to work, but if you want to try the new stuff and figure out the conflicts, be my guest. But if you want it to work for sure, use the dependencies that I use. So go to my build.gradle project file, just basically copy everything that I have in here. Note that this dependency right here, the secrets plugin, this is used so that we can, this is needed so that we can add our API key to the local .properties file in your Android project. So let me just go and show you what that is. If you go down to the local .properties file, again, I'm going to blank out my API key here. But so you can add the Google Maps API key to your local properties file, and then you can reference that in your manifest. So if we go over to my manifest, notice that I've added this metadata tag and it's referencing that Google Maps API key from my local .properties file. So just wanted to make sure I mentioned that that's what this plugin is for. So copy everything here that I have in my project build.gradle file, and then move on to the app level build.gradle file. And again, always a good idea to copy everything that I have to make sure that it works. So the same plugins, the same compile SDK, target SDK, everything here, Kotlin version, that's very important. If you have the wrong Kotlin version, a lot of these dependencies will have conflicts. So using the correct Kotlin version is very important. Basically, use these same versions and it will work for you. If you don't, you are opening yourself up to problems, which be my guest. So once you've copied all of the dependencies to the project build.gradle, the app build.gradle, now you want to add your API key to local.properties. So where's your API key, you might ask? Well, that's over here in this section. Again, I'm going to blank mine out, but just click this copy to clipboard. And then what you want to do is go over to that local.properties, create this constant value Google Maps API key, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. Paste in your API key here, and then go to your manifest and add this metadata tag inside of the application and reference that Google Maps API key. Now, I think the last thing we got to do here is actually just go to the manifest and add access find location and access course location. So you can copy those, go to the manifest, paste these up above. I don't think you actually need course location. I think you just need find location, but you can add them both just to be safe. And the last step here is if it's not working, go watch the video that you are watching right now, and maybe I missed something. I don't think I did. I'm pretty sure I went through all these steps, and those are all the things that are required. So now once you've done that to your project, you are ready to get started. So now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to like write all the code out on video here, but I'm just going to sort of highlight things that are of importance, and you can go take a look at the code yourself. You can see, you know, there's not a lot of code here. There's one activity, you know, an application class, just because I'm using Hilt, one state class. I have a view model that's relatively simple. And then there's kind of the more complicated stuff I think is in here. So like setting up, how to set up the clustering, that's probably the trickiest part. So let's start by taking a look at the activity. So I have an activity. We of course have to use the activity for result API to ask for the user's permission when the app launches. I'll actually just do a demo really quick. I'm going to uninstall the app and I'm going to reinstall it to show you that it asks permission. Oh, actually something else that's very important. If you go to the manifest, notice here I have allow backups false. So what that's going to do is if the user declines a permission twice, the app will never ask them again for that permission. The user will have to go into the manually go into the settings for the app on the phone and enable or disable the permission. Even if you uninstall the app and reinstall it, the app still will cache those files and remember that the user declined the permission twice, and it will never ask them again. So even through an uninstall, that's the key point here. But if you set allow backups to false, if you uninstall the app and reinstall it, it will, those I guess preferences are wiped. So when you reinstall the app, it will ask them the permission again. I think this is always a good thing to do when you're in development because you know, you can always test the permissions in a fresh state. So setting allow backups to false, if you uninstall the app, reinstall it, it's going to ask the permissions again, even if they've declined them twice. So just wanted to mention that. Okay, so I just uninstalled the app. Now let's reinstall this thing, and I'll show you the permission screen. So as soon as you run the app, it asks for permission, and this is for the access find location. So I'm going to click yes for when you want to use this app, and then you see that little blue dot appear because it's now accessing my location. So that is the request API here that's looking for the access find location permission. Nothing sort of fancy here. We have the fused location provider client. This is the API that's needed to get the user's location. I have a ask permissions function, which just kind of kicks off the permission asking process. And then we have a composable and map screen. So let's go into this map screen. You can either click over here or control click or command click if you're on a Mac, and take a look at this thing. So it takes in the main state. The main state is very simple. It just holds the location and a list of cluster items, and we'll talk more about those later. So now how do we use Google Maps? Well, it's very simple now. All you need to use is use this Google Map Composable. The Google Map Composable takes in a whole bunch of different properties. Basically, a lot of these things are like handling clicks, setting certain properties to the map. So you have like this map properties object, map UI settings object. I'm keeping it super simple in this example. You can play around with those if you want, but basically all I'm using here is a map properties object. And this is actually very important. Is my location enabled? If you haven't accepted the access find or access course location permission, this will throw an exception. So that's why here I'm referencing the state and saying if the last location is not null, then this is enabled. And the last known location will only be not null if they have accepted that permission. So if we take a look at the view model and we look at the get device location function, it takes in that fused location provider client that I talked about earlier. This will get the location. It starts a request to get the location, and once it does successfully, then it sets the last known location to the state. So only if this is able to successfully get their location, the last known location will not be null, and therefore the map properties will set is my location enabled to true. So kind of just, that's a pretty important thing here, to don't enable this unless you have the permission accepted. So scrolling down, we just, set those map properties. You can manipulate the camera view position using this remember camera position state, and I'll take a look at that down below a little closer. I guess we'll do that now before I talk about the rest of this in here. So if this is how you want to manipulate the camera state, you can do remember camera position, pass it into your Google map, and if I scroll down here, you can see I'm using that camera position state, and I can call animate on it. There's a bunch of other ways you can move the camera too. Like if I look at these functions, you can go center on location. I guess those are the only two actually, but you can do center on location or there's move. So there's three actually. There's animate, center on location, and move, and they all are slightly different ways to move the camera. Animate is the best one, I think, because it moves the camera. It animates the camera over to the position as opposed to just like snapping the view over to it. I think that always looks much nicer, obviously. And then the way that you update the camera is also a bit optional. So if I look at, let's just do camera update factory here and take a look at the options. We have new lat lang zoom, so new latitude longitude zoom. You can set bounds, you can set the position, just different ways to move the camera. The one that I chose to use is new lat lang bounds, because in the app that I made here, when you start the app, it will automatically center the camera on all of the polygons that are on the map. So using lat lang bounds was just the obvious choice here, but there's lots of other options. I also added another example down here if you want to center on a specific location. So I'm not using this function. You can see it's not being used, but I just wanted to add it here so that you had another example. So before I go back and I talk about this map effect stuff, I think it's probably worth talking about this function here, calculate zone view center. So this is something that I made. If I go to the activity where this function is invoked, it goes to the view model. What it does is it gets all of the points of all of the polygons that are all of the points that make up the polygons on the map. So you can see here, like it would take that point, that point, that point, that point. It takes all of the points that are defined by the polygons, and then it uses those to calculate the optimal view for the camera. And this is just a little algorithm that I wrote. So if I click into this thing, you can read through this, but it's pretty complicated. It's just a lot of math here. But if you want to take a look at it, go ahead, or just use it. Just use it in your projects and don't worry about how it works. That's always a good choice. And then it gets the center of the polygon given that camera viewpoint. So pretty cool little thing that I just added here. Always nice to be able to center the camera where the user should be looking at, as opposed to making them like move it manually. Okay, so last thing I want to talk about here is the Google Map. So this is kind of the bulk of the changes. Remember at the beginning of the video, I said that I had done this in a personal project about 1.5 years ago, and it was much more difficult, much more complicated to do because this Google Map composable didn't exist. This map effect thing didn't exist. I can actually show you what I previously had to do. So yeah, actually, it's not that much more complicated, the Google Map portion, but the map effect is much nicer. I'll talk more about that later. But yeah, basically you had to use an Android view and pass a map view into it. And that's actually what the Google Map does under the hood. So if you take a look at this thing, it still uses an Android view and passes a map view. It just makes it easier for us. It's just a nicer API to work with. And the map effect, I think, though, is the biggest win for us. Because previously what you had to do if you wanted to use clusters, the cluster manager requires a Google Map object. So if I take a look here at my cluster manager, it requires a Google Map object. And to get the Google Map object, that was not easy. So that's what this map effect makes easier. If I click into this, it gives us the Google Map object, which is beautiful. And then I can build my cluster manager, which is the thing that's required to build these clusters. The cluster manager is the thing that manages all the clusters. It's a pretty obvious naming convention, I think. So like this is a cluster and this is a cluster. And the cluster manager is how you it's like the way to highly customize your map. You can add custom map markers. You can add the polygons. There's lots of other options. This project is very simple, so all I did was add, some markers with some info and some polygons, but there's also other stuff you can do, like custom images for the markers. So pretty simple to set up. Basically what you need to do, I guess let's go through that whole process of how to set up a cluster manager. So the first thing is you need to define some kind of cluster item. So I created a data class called zone cluster item. It will extend the cluster item class. The required fields are these override fields. So we need to be able to get a snippet, although I think you could probably just return like an empty string, a title. So let me just pull up the app to show you. So that's the title, zone 2, and then the description or the snippet is this is zone 2. That's what these fields are. And then position is where is this thing going to be. So you can see here that I use the polygon options, which is what is used to define the area of this polygon. And then I get the center of it, and that's where this marker is going to live. So you need to create a data class called zone cluster item that extends cluster item. Basically, that's the punchline. And then you need to create a zone cluster manager. This is a very simple one. The required parameters are the context and that Google Map object that I was talking about earlier. You specify the type, so you use that object that you created that extends cluster item, and then you pass in the parameters, the context, and the Google Map. That's basically all you need to do to get working what I have here, and then you just need to create those cluster items and create the manager, which I'll show you next. Okay, so creating the cluster items, let's go into the view model. So I just added them to the state, which makes things really easy. Remember, in our main state, I have a list of zone cluster items, which is those custom items that I built here. And we, just create a cluster item. They have an ID, a title, snippet, and then this polygon options parameter. So this is how we create those boundaries. So you just add points. So I added some latitude and longitude points. The way that these points are oriented is it goes from left to right, so counterclockwise. So if I zoom in closer on this thing, because you can't actually, hide the marker, you can't actually see. But there's a point here, a point here, a point here, and a point here. So that's the 4 points. You don't have to have 4 points. You could have 10, 12, 100 points. It doesn't matter. I just used 4 because I thought it was easy. So point 1, this point here is this one. And then it moves in a counterclockwise way. So point 2, point 3, point 4. And just, basically just counterclockwise. That's the most important thing. And then you can add a fill color. So I added a red fill color, and that's pretty much it. Pretty simple. And then I created the secondary cluster item, which if I zoom out, you can see over here. And if I click it, you get that information. Or actually, sorry, this one is zone 1 and the other one was zone 2. You can see if I click on there, maybe I got to click on my phone. There we go. So that is generally it. It's not that complicated. It's much better than it used to be. You can see here the map effect takes in a key value, and I used the cluster items from the state as the key. So if if you were to add more cluster items, like say you were to make an API request, that API request pulled down more latitude and longitude points for those polygons. That would mean this would recompose with those new cluster items. It would create a new cluster manager. It would, set the clicks and then add the polygons to the map. And I think that's a pretty good way to do it. The last thing I want to talk about is there are some gotchas with this new API. So with the new Google Map API, there's an example here. So I've added a marker window, and this is actually talked about in the GitHub page. So you can go and take a look at that if you want. But some of these things don't work. So the marker here will actually show, and it's on my map. If I zoom out and I go over to this marker, it actually is there. But if I click it, like I'm clicking it right now, and the info window doesn't work, and you can see here that this log is not going to print. So I can see there's nothing being printed in the log, even though I did click that. Again, also I have draggable equals true. If I try and drag it, that doesn't work. Basically, these don't work. But that's okay, because as I've shown you in this video, we can use the cluster manager, the zone cluster item, and we can add markers that way. So it doesn't really matter. It just means that this doesn't work, but we have an alternative. We can use the clusters. And if you just want to add a marker with no polygon, like say, let me see here. If you pull up the app and say you wanted to add, just add this marker and you didn't want to add the polygon, that's simple. You would just go into the view model and get rid of these polygon options. If you don't have the polygon options, then if we go to the map screen, or basically just don't do this. If you don't add the polygons, then there won't be any shape. It's just going to be a marker. So if you need to add a marker, you can still do it. There's just a more there's more steps involved. So that's gonna be it for this video. Of course, down below there's a link to the code. Code is always free. It's on GitHub. I know I just kind of went through the code here. I didn't actually write it out, so you definitely should go take a look at the code if you're interested and you want to use Google Maps in your Compose project. And before you go, don't forget to go to codingwithmitch.com. Check out my website. If you want to support my channel, support the videos that I'm making here, these free videos, go ahead and check out some of my paid videos. If you think my free videos are good, imagine what my paid videos are like. Go to my website, create an account. I got tons of courses on here. You can go to the courses section. My most recent course is a GIF building app. This app is a ton of fun. Hey, why not show you an application demo of this course? So what you do when the app launches is you can choose a screenshot. Let me crop this thing and we can make a GIF. We can make a GIF with the Deal With It sunglasses. So I'm going to resize this thing, hit record, slide the sunglasses down onto my face, click end, and what it will do is it will build that GIF, and we can optionally resize it and we can save it to the internal storage of the phone. And what would you do with a GIF like this, you might ask? Well, what I personally like to do is I like to go to my company Slack where I work at Square. I like to steal people's profile picture, and anytime they do something cool, like, you know, posting in a public channel and say, hey, I just merged these cool changes or whatever, I like to make a GIF out of it and I comment on what they said with the cool sunglasses sliding down. I love it. It's laughs every single time. You know, also commenting on pull requests, reviewing pull requests. Anytime somebody does something cool, adding that GIF. I love it. Guaranteed laughs every time. Now, I can't show you my company Slack, but what I can show you is my private Discord channel. So if you want to see an example, this is what one will look like. Here's me with the sunglasses coming down onto my face. This GIF was produced with the app that you build in that course. But that's not the only course I have. I got tons. I got all kinds of stuff. Modularizing Android apps, very popular course. Shows you how to create multi-module Android projects with clean architecture and tons of new stuff. Kotlin, MVI, Compose, Hilt, SQL Delight, which is a caching library actually built by Square. KTOR, which is an alternative to retrofit. Unit testing, UI testing, all kinds of good stuff. I have a Kotlin multi-platform mobile course. Actually, fun fact, that app that I showed you in this video, BC Hydro Outages, I actually built this with Kotlin multi-platform mobile. I have an iOS client and an Android client. They share the business logic, and I've had this out in production for about a year and a half now, and I've had zero problems with it, so it's going quite well. Lots of good stuff here, lots of courses. I even do some web stuff if you're interested in, learning some web development. I built my own website, codingwithmitch.com, if you didn't know that. It's built with Python, Django, JavaScript, lots of cool stuff. This course in particular that I'm highlighting here is a real-time chat messenger. So I show you how to build a real-time chat website using sockets and Python. Lots of good stuff. Go to the website, check out the courses. There's, tons. I've been doing this for years, people. Lots of good courses here. Go check it out. As always, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.